Okay, picture this. You've just been handed a task that could dictate millions of dollars in international development funding. Or maybe it's shaping a major public policy. You sit down, gather the research, and you hit a brick wall. Instead of a clear answer, you were staring at a massive, chaotic pile of conflicting research papers. Sound familiar? In this explainer, we're going to unravel a core mystery that pretty much every analyst, policymaker, and researcher eventually faces. How in the world do you move from that messy pile of contradictions to a clear, actionable, and completely defensible truth? It's super common to fall into the trap of thinking that just finding research papers is the same as actually understanding what the overall evidence says. You find 10 studies, and suddenly you're drowning in positive findings, negative findings, wild contradictions, and entirely different methodologies. Well, today we're going to map out exactly how to navigate that chaos without just counting votes and without relying on AI to do all the thinking for us.
To make this real, let's run a little detective investigation together. Our central research question for this case is, does adaptive management improve program performance in international development programs? Notice how specific that is? We are not just looking for a simple yes or no. We want to know under exactly what conditions it actually works. Having a highly defined question like this is the absolute non-negotiable starting point for our investigation because it tells us exactly what evidence is relevant and what specific clues we need to extract.
So imagine you're the researcher on this case. You've gone out and gathered 6 crucial clues, 6 different studies. Study A, which is a large quasi-experimental study, says performance definitely improved. Okay, great. Study B, an observational study, also sees a positive association. We are on a roll, but wait. Study C, a comparative evaluation, finds absolutely no clear effect. Study D, well, it says the effect is conditional. Study E is purely qualitative and just notes some perceived responsiveness. And Study F, it gives us a completely frustrating mixed bag of results across different countries. Now, if you just skimmed these surface-level results, you might just throw your hands up in defeat. Or worse, you might think, well, 4 out of 6 lean positive, so it must work, right? No way. That is a massive trap. That is merely counting studies, not synthesizing evidence. And that brings us to this massive, flashing neon rule of research. Summary is not synthesis. If we just sat down and wrote 6 perfectly crafted summaries of those papers, sure, we'd understand each study individually, but we still wouldn't have a clue what the combined body of evidence actually means. A summary simply reduces information to describe a single paper. Synthesis, on the other hand, synthesis establishes relationships between all the different pieces of evidence. It forces us to ask the tough questions. Where do they agree? Are they even measuring the same thing? Synthesis interrogates the entire body of evidence rather than just passively describing it. So how do we build our way out of this chaos? We use an evidence matrix. By creating common fields, things like context, method, sample, and main finding, we fundamentally shift our entire intellectual approach. We are no longer reading document by document, aimlessly wandering from paper A to paper B. Instead, this matrix completely changes our unit of analysis. Now, we can look straight down a single column and ask, hey, which findings come from stronger designs? Or are these contexts completely different from one another? We've successfully transformed raw, messy documents into structured, comparable evidence. Now, I know what you might be wondering. Where does artificial intelligence fit into all this? Well, AI is a fantastic tool here, but its real role is structured extraction, not open-ended summarization. You definitely don't want to just upload 6 papers to an AI chatbot and say, hey, summarize these for me. Instead, as the researcher, you define the rigid analytical structure of that evidence matrix. You literally tell the AI, extract the study context, methodology, sample, and findings. And if it's missing, write not reported. The AI does the heavy lifting of populating those rows and columns. It accelerates your exploration, but, and this is absolutely key, it doesn't make the final critical judgments for you. Once we have all that data extracted, we usually hit a psychological hurdle. The studies disagree. Some show no effect, some are totally mixed. And human instinct tells us to treat those contradictions as inconvenient exceptions that we just need to explain away. But here's the thing. Disagreement is information. Contradiction isn't a problem you need to remove, it's actually vital evidence you need to understand. Why did study C show no effect? Maybe it was due to poor implementation, or maybe it was set in a completely different organizational culture. Investigating those specific differences is exactly where the most valuable insights are born. Which brings us to our next core principle, and it's a big one. Evidence is not a vote. It is so incredibly tempting to look at our 6 studies and say, well, 5 report positive findings and only 1 reports no effect. 5 beats 1, so the intervention definitely works. No, that is terrible evidence synthesis. Studies are fundamentally unequal. It is totally absurd to weigh a tiny perception survey equally against a massive, rigorous, quasi-experimental study. 5-week studies do not automatically outweigh 2 very strong studies. We absolutely have to evaluate the methodology, rather than just tallying up positive results like we're keeping score at a football game.
Let's bring back our matrix and zoom in on 2 completely new crucial columns: limitation and evidence strength. We are finally asking the quality question. Look at study A. It might have a highly positive finding, but its limitation is that it might not apply outside its specific context. Though, to be fair, its overall strength is still rated stronger because of its rigorous method. Now look at study E. It shows positive perceptions, but it relies purely on self-reporting, making its evidence strength merely contextual. We aren't doing this so an AI can invent some magical, arbitrary quality score. We're doing this to stop treating all evidence as if it's perfectly equivalent. Let's actually see this quality appraisal in action by comparing 2 possible conclusions. Conclusion A says, 4 of 6 studies reported positive findings, suggesting it works. I mean, it sounds nice, punchy, and super confident, right? But it completely ignores methodology and context. Now listen to conclusion B. Effects are inconsistent and dependent on organizational conditions. Confidence in a universal effect is limited. Okay, yeah, it's definitely less dramatic and a whole lot more cautious. But by incorporating context, accounting for methodology, and actually preserving our uncertainty, conclusion B is profoundly more defensible.
This really draws a clear line in the sand when we talk about the boundary of AI in this synthesis process. Recent reviews on AI readiness show that while AI is amazing at structured tasks, it's just not mature enough to hand over complex interpretation. AI can absolutely help extract data, organize evidence into your matrix, locate those apparent contradictions, and trace claims back to sources. But AI cannot define your research questions. It cannot choose your appraisal methods, and it absolutely cannot decide evidentiary weight. That kind of methodological judgment, that is the non-negotiable responsibility of the human researcher, you.
And once you, the human, have developed your synthesis, you have to actually prove it. Every single claim you make has to survive scrutiny. This is called the claim-to-source audit trail. And trust me, it's what saves your skin when a policymaker challenges your findings. You start with your synthesis claim, then you track it directly to the supporting study. From there, you identify the original finding. Then you locate the exact source passage or data point, and finally, you conform a verified interpretation. If you claim that adaptive management works best when local teams have decision-making autonomy, you better be able to trace that step by step back to the exact passage in the original text that proves it. Now, I need to issue a major warning right here. A real source can still result in a wrong claim. This is a super subtle trap, especially when you're using automated tools. A citation can be completely genuine, like the paper exists, the link works flawlessly, but it still completely fails to support the statement attached to it. For example, a study might report that staff perceived they were being more responsive. An unsupported synthesis might accidentally twist that into adaptive management increased program impact. The source is 100% real, but the claim is dead wrong. Verification means checking if the source actually supports the specific claim being made. As you trace your claims and build out your synthesis, you are inevitably going to hit some dead ends. Researchers love to casually say, oh, there is a research gap, but there are actually 3 distinct types of gaps, and they mean very, very different things. The first is a true gap. This one is the most straightforward. A true gap means little or no relevant evidence appears to exist on an important question. The research simply hasn't been done at all, period. The second type is a coverage gap. In this scenario, we actually do have research and evidence, but it doesn't cover an important population, country, context, or specific outcome. So we might have 10 amazing studies on adaptive management in urban healthcare programs, but absolutely 0 data on rural agricultural programs. The evidence exists, but the specific coverage we need, it just doesn't. Finally, we have the quality gap. This happens when the studies absolutely exist and they even cover the exact right populations, but their methodology is just too weak to answer the question confidently. Maybe they're all just tiny perception surveys with massive biases. Having 50 low-quality studies doesn't mean you have a defensible answer. Merely possessing documents is absolutely not the same thing as possessing high-quality evidence. Understanding those gaps leads us to a really crucial semantic difference, stating no evidence exists versus saying no relevant evidence was identified in this search. This is incredibly important, especially when relying on AI search tools. If an AI system fails to locate research, that does not definitively prove a true gap exists. It literally just means that specific tool didn't find it within its specific database parameters.
Claiming no evidence exists is a massive sweeping statement, whereas noting that none was identified in your specific search is accurate, it's honest, and most importantly, it's defensible.
So, we've done the extraction, we've analyzed all those contradictions, and we've carefully appraised the quality. What is the final verdict of our 6-study investigation? Well, we can confidently say that adaptive management can improve responsiveness. But effects vary considerably across contexts. Measurable improvements heavily depend on leadership and decision authority. And critically, differences in study design limit our confidence in a universal causal conclusion. Look at what we did there. We didn't count votes, we didn't try to erase the contradictions, we incorporated context, and we preserved our uncertainty to create a truly synthesized, defensible answer.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought. The purpose of evidence synthesis is not to make different studies agree. It is to determine what the total body of evidence can and cannot support. The next time you are faced with a mountain of conflicting information, I want you to remember this. Don't try to force harmony where there is contradiction. Let the disagreements guide you. Definitely leverage AI for the heavy lifting of extraction, but always, always keep your hands firmly on the methodological steering wheel. What contradictions are hiding in your research right now, just waiting to be understood?